to a Hope 1032 podcast. The Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore, because life's just better with a book.
Welcome to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore. And today we're joined by Kyle Grice from the Little Lost Bookshop in Katoomba, and Kyle is also behind the Wandering Bookseller. In episode 33 of the Hope Book Club, we're staying homegrown. Natasha has been reading Smart Ovens for Lonely People, a collection of quirky and funny short stories by Elizabeth Tan. Kyle Grice has been reading Chasing the McCubbin by Sandi Saunich. Set in 1990s Melbourne, this novel is about a collector who wants to uncover an original McCubbin among the garage sales he tours with his 19-year-old companion. And I've been reading The Funny Thing About Norman Foreman by Julietta Henderson, the story of an 11-year-old dealing with the loss of his best friend and of the mum who will do anything to make him happy again. Plus, we'll discuss which section of the bookshop we go to first and why. But first, let's hear from Smart Ovens for Lonely People by Elizabeth Tan.
It's Monday, and Myer is having the greatest stocktake sale of all time. And there's a giant backlit poster of Miranda Kerr smiling indulgently with a wrist of pearls. And the shopping centre is flooded with daylight and hope. There is a girl sitting on a unicorn in the middle of the shopping centre, and the artificial trees are green and shimmering, and the lady at the makeup counter waits with an armful of flyers and a cherry-flavoured smile. It's Monday, and children tug at their parents' sleeves and ask if they can ride the pony or the zebra or the tiger. They clamber into the miniature saddles and pedal the giant animals across the checkered tiles. There is a girl sitting on a unicorn in the middle of the shopping centre, framed in the square of a skylight, wearing jelly sandals and pink tights and a tutu skirt and a t-shirt which says Elsa and Anna. It's Monday, and today there are specials like no other, and there are pert macarons at the patisserie counter that are all the colours of a chalky rainbow. There are vast pyramids of cruelty-free bath bombs that smell like avocado or honey or fizzy sherbet. Miranda Kerr is smiling, and her teeth are brighter than a cachet of luxury steak knives, and her eyes are huge caverns of feeling. She believes in her pearl bracelet, and she wants you to believe that she believes in her pearl bracelet, and together you have a special understanding. Just you and Miranda Kerr, and nobody else.
Smart Ovens for Lonely People is a collection of funny and quirky short stories by Elizabeth Tan. Known for her humour and sharp social commentary, Elizabeth Tan is developing a following not just in Australia but around the world. Natasha Moore has been reading her new book. G'day, Natasha.
Hi, Katrina.
So this is only the second book from Elizabeth Tan. She published Rubik in 2017. Have you read that book, and what do you like about her writing?
I haven't read that one, but I really want to now that I've read her short stories. So I read an article, I think, in the Sydney Review of Books about both books, and it made me desperately want to read this. And so I kind of nudged/bullied my book club into choosing it as our first book of this year. And I think everybody in my book club really enjoyed it. It's very Australian, but at the same time, very weird. Kind of futuristic. You can't really tell where it is, but it, at the same time, somehow feels very Australian and just kind of endlessly inventive. I'm like, how do you think of that? How do you think of that? How do you think of this other thing? So I loved that.
Okay. So it's a collection of short stories. What do they all have in common? Is there anything that ties them together?
Nope, I would say no, except for the quirkiness. So, some of them are very, very short and some of them are much longer. So some are 2 pages, and I've heard the term flash fiction used of that kind of, it's just a snapshot of something, but it becomes very vivid. There's one early on which is about, the most kind of fantastic things become just normal. There's one which, as you're reading it, it becomes apparent that it's being told by a mermaid of sorts who these kind of mermaids have been created somehow. You don't know how, and you don't know kind of what time frame this is in, to be in like a fish tank at a restaurant. And people love coming to this restaurant to kind of watch the mermaids, but they keep them sedated so that they're, you know, happy where they are and float around very elegantly. But they reduce the sedation in order to introduce fish to the tank, and the mermaids start getting a bit kind of boisterous or opinionated and decide that they want to escape. So like this very kind of random scenario that you just have this kind of in a handful of pages, but it's so vividly drawn. And then there's kind of weird things like there's one where all the washing machines in the world have this glitch at the same time where any clothes that were in a washing machine switched on at that time disappear, and no one knows what's happened to them or why. And that's kind of this like quite weird premise, but what follows from that is quite mundane, that you're like, oh, well, that was like my favorite dress and now it's gone just because I was unlucky enough to be washing it at that moment. And so a lot of it is it has a thread of technology and absurdism. It's like, I think, the sort of upbeat, funny version of Black Mirror. If you've seen that series, which is actually a very dark imagining of like our techno-dystopian future. This is kind of a future where technology and social media and stuff is a lot more integrated in our lives. And that's maybe a bad thing, but maybe just a complicated thing. And because she's so funny and the scenes are so kind of urban Australia-esque, it's not some kind of dark, depressing tale, but it does make you think about, you know, those kinds of like, oh, is this how we want our lives to be? Am I like that?
I was going to say she's sort of known for her social commentary. So did she kind of hit the mark with that for you?
Yeah, I think with a light touch, like she doesn't have kind of lessons to draw. And I think the things that she conveys to us are mostly through humour. Like one of my favourite stories, and she has like these fabulous titles for her stories as well. Like it's all very wacky. So she has one that's called Shirt Dresses That Look a Little Too Much Like Shirts So That It Looks Like You Forgot to Put on Pants, brackets, Love Will Save the Day. And this is quite a long story where like there's lots of random things that happen in it. You know, there's an HR department that is like, we have to talk to the girls in the office about the shirt dresses that they wear that look a bit too much like shirts. And so it looks like you forgot to put on pants. And that's kind of a delicate conversation to have with the girls in the office. But also, you know, this is a kind of future dystopian thing. So there's also this pigeon that comes as a floating office assistant, which has been programmed to offer like perky aphorisms that are drawn from 1990s pop songs. So it will say things like, it is not advisable to pursue waterfalls, like as in don't go chasing waterfalls. So there's like, you have kind of all these like different cross currents happening there, which is what I mean by her being so inventive. But it also makes you think about things like, oh yeah, HR departments and how well or badly they can do their jobs, and what does it mean to be, if you're like the last person in the world playing a particular game on your phone and the company is like, why are you still playing it? Like nobody else wants to play this game. You know, where are we getting connection from? What brings meaning to our lives? Like there are all kinds of themes that are brought in, but mostly it's just a lot of fun. And, you know, it's got kind of that piercingness to it because of those comments, but these are not morality tales.
What did you like about, you know, reading short stories as opposed to a longer novel? Because personally, I kind of shy away from books of short stories, but did you enjoy reading these like that?
I actually really did. I don't read that many short stories, unfortunately. Tell me why you would shy away from short stories.
I think because I don't find them as satisfying. You know, I'm not going to stay with the characters for very long.
Mm-hmm. I suppose partly it was just really good for where I was, like it was over the summer, and so it was really helpful attention-wise to be like, oh, like you kind of achieved something in a short space of time, you know, and so you can kind of dip in and out and you feel like you're making progress. And I think because the worlds that she invents are so fun and so kind of out of left field, you just don't know where this is going. It's not an exercise so much in like, oh, I'm following these characters and I just really want to know what happens to them. It's more, I just want to see this unfold, this like little snapshot that you've created. And so you're not kind of distressed that you only get the snapshot. Because really the delight is in, even though, you know, her characters and her narrators are quite well drawn and you do get to know them and they're quite different from one another, the beauty of it is really in the like how dazzling the imagination is. And so it's fun that goes in all kinds of different directions. But, you know, I do want to go back and read her previous novel, and I look forward to reading probably anything she writes from here on out, because I was just so impressed with her as a writer and as a imaginative genius.
That's a glowing recommendation, Natasha.
Yeah, isn't it?
If you've read it, tell us what you thought of it. bookclub@hopemedia.com.au or text in 0448 40 20 20. Chasing the McCubbin is a new Australian novel by Sandi Saunich that takes us to Melbourne in the 1990s. Ron has struggled to get back on his feet after losing his wife, and he spends his days touring garage sales looking for gems. When he befriends 19-year-old Joseph, the two form a bond and start a quest to find an original McCubbin that will make both their fortunes. Carl Grice is from the Little Lost Bookshop in Katoomba. He's been reading this one. Hi, Carl.
Hi, Katrina.
So tell us about Ron. Why is he touring garage sales? What's taken him to that place?
It's something he'd started before his wife died, and he's sort of continuing it on, maybe just because he's not really sure what else to do. So before she died, their dream was to find a McCubbin or something similar. They had a friend who had found an original Frederick McCubbin painting, sold it for thousands, and had a trip to Europe. So that was always their aspirations, to go together to Europe. And that never really happened because she dies before the novel starts. But that's the aspiration there. And I think he's just a little lost in a sense without her.
And how does he come to be mixed up with 19-year-old Joseph?
So he visits the CES, which is the old Centrelink, as many people were in the early 90s. It's high unemployment. And he meets Joseph's mum. And there's a bit of tricky history there for her and her son. But she says, my son needs to do something. He's 19, he's unemployed, he needs money, he can't find a job. And she hooks him up with this aging Ron who drives his van around looking for bargains at garage sales. So it's a really unlikely friendship, and doesn't really even start as a friendship. It's more a matter of pragmatics. But they're the two main characters as the story goes on.
And so what do these two characters gain from each other?
I don't know how much I don't want to spoil the story, but they do grow. There is a friendship that grows. And it's an uncomfortable friendship and it's a bit awkward. I think for Ron, it gives him someone to talk to. And so all this wisdom he has about garage sales and how to find the right bargain, and how to get there before someone else, or to find they get the street directory out, the old Melway. And he teaches him how to use that and how to navigate around Melbourne quickly. And just tells him about all the different types of people and the types of houses, which sort of house is most likely to have antiques, which one is just going to have junk. And so it's this passing on of wisdom, I guess. Not necessarily wisdom that Joseph was looking for, but it's a kind of wisdom. So.
When you mentioned the Melways and looking it up, I immediately thought of me with my Gregories that I used to use driving around Sydney in the 90s. And it just takes you back, doesn't it? Was Melbourne in the 90s a good place to visit in this book?
I mean, it's an interesting place. They spend a lot of time in the suburbs. I think a really strong theme through the book is this sense that people are a bit stuck. So unemployment's high, but also interest rates were high. And so people are getting evicted from houses all the time. And I think that really plays into this theme of the garage sales. There are lots of garage sales because people are having to move out of rentals. There's homelessness on the rise. And so it's not all fun and games visiting garage sales. There's this real, I guess, sadness. There's a melancholy theme through the novel in that the people going to the garage sales are aspiring for something that they can't quite find. They don't always find the gems they're looking for, but also they're digging through the treasures of people who have hit hard times. And so it's sort of it's very melancholy. But as a Frederick McCubbin's paintings, so it's kind of appropriate almost that they're searching for McCubbins.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say the book's really about?
In the end, they do find something. It's not a gem. It's not a physical. I think there's a sense of community that comes through by the end of the story, and I don't think that's what they were looking for. And so, in a way, I feel like it surprises each of the characters when they find it. Not everything. It's a bittersweet ending. It's not all happy at the end, but I think that sense of friendship that Joseph wasn't looking for. He wasn't looking for Ron. Ron wasn't looking for him. They weren't looking for each other, and even the other characters that are at the garage sales, they all get nicknames through the book, like Red Wagon or the Russian or the Thief or the Toolmen, because the Toolmen are looking for tools. They don't feel like real characters through the book. They're caricatures, but by the end of the book, you start to discover that behind each of these names, they're real people, and so it's a book about real people living through hard times, and trying to find some sense of hope in that.
Okay, so what's good about this book? What did you like about it?
I really loved the ending. I was worried. I got into it at the start. As you get sort of halfway through the book and they're just driving to garage sale after garage sale, I thought, is this going anywhere, or are we just going to spend the whole novel driving around Melbourne not finding what we're looking for? But it does land really, really beautifully and quickly at the end. Like, it's a surprise. I don't want to say what happens, but I think. No. If you're getting through it and you're getting to the middle thinking this all seems futile and hopeless, I'd say just push on to the end, and it just ties together really well. I think particularly now at a time when there are people, I think, struggling again, trying to find places to rent, trying to work out how to buy a house. There are some similarities between now and the early 90s for some people, not for everyone, but for some people. People searching through hard rubbish in Melbourne. There was a story about that in the newspaper the other week. Hard rubbish being the rubbish that we leave out for the council to collect. So they go to garage sales, but they also go through that hard rubbish. And I think in a way it's a book that sort of says we've been here before. So 30 years ago, people went through this. There are some people going through the same thing now, but it's worth persisting. So don't give up, but try and look around you at the people that are in your life and see if you can find that friendship there, perhaps more than finding the original McCubbin. I mean, you might, but I don't think that's the main point.
Yeah, awesome. No, it sounds good. It sounds good. Who do you think would enjoy it then, Carl?
I think especially people who did live through the 90s, whether in Melbourne or, I mean, I grew up closer to Sydney, but I definitely enjoyed a lot of the little snippets from 1990s technology or the soapies that were on in the 1990s. There's so many really classic references to the early 90s. I'm still a bit surprised that that's history now. Like I feel like that was yesterday. I'm not sure when I think that's 30 years ago now. I don't know what happened to those 30 years. But certainly if you lived through the 90s and you can remember the 90s, I think you'll really enjoy the book for that reason alone. So.
No, I think so too. And you're right. It just seems like yesterday. Where's the time gone? Oh, thanks, Carl.
Yeah.
That's Carl Grice from the Little Lost Bookshop. We've been talking about Chasing the McCubbin by Sandi Saunich. So, guys, I mean, Carl, you need to start with this one. You're the bookshop expert since you actually have a bookshop.
Yes.
When you step into a bookshop, a new one, which section do you go to first and why?
I was going to say the back office, but that's not a legitimate answer, is it?
No.
No. I actually go looking for poetry. I really like poetry, and sometimes you find short stories there as well. I don't mind reading short stories, but I go looking for a poet I haven't read or haven't discovered before. So I'm always looking for something quirky.
Do you have a good poetry section in your bookstore, Carl?
I like to think so. Other people come looking for poetry.
Because not all bookstores do. Some of them have very tiny poetry sections.
We love poetry in Katoomba. Yeah,
it's probably against your commercial interest to stock a lot of poetry, I can imagine, but it's a purist pursuit. Yes. What about you, Natasha?
I really like this question. I think I either go, depending on my mood and intentions, I go straight for the classics. which sounds very virtuous, though not as virtuous as going for the poetry, I've got to say. But I feel like it's books that I have heard of and that I might want, and that are usually cheaper than the bestsellers, the new books that are out. Or else I go for the children's section, because often when I'm shopping in a real bookstore, I want to look for kids' books, which I will only ever buy in actual physical form. I don't like buying them online. I want to see what they're like and how they feel and stuff. So I love a bookstore with a good children's section, like Carl's bookstore, actually. Has some really great children's books. How about you, Katrina?
Well, what do you think I'm going to say?
Children's books.
Well, I think the truth is that I often go to the new fiction first, because it's at the front door on the way in.
True. We all go there first, technically.
But I do like to see what's out in new fiction. But yes, I tend to spend the most time in the children's section. And like you, I agree that particularly with a picture book, you want to touch it, see it, smell it. You know, there might be things to feel, or there might be shiny gold stamped bits on the cover or something like that. So it is always lovely to pick up children's books and hold them in your hand.
Competition.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. That was fun. Well, what I've been reading is a book. It's by an Australian author, kind of. She now lives a lot of the time over in the UK, but it's called The Funny Thing About Norman Foreman, and it's about an 11-year-old. It is set in the UK. The 11-year-old Norman Foreman and his single mum, Sadie. So Norman's lost his best friend, Jax, who dies unexpectedly. And Norman is a pretty, unpopular kid. Like, he's not super popular. He's got this terrible psoriasis on his skin, and he's just not a cool, confident kid. But with Jax is kind of like the naughty kid, but kind of lovable. He's never needed any other friend until, of course, Jax dies. And then that just really plunges Norman into crisis. They together had a 5-year plan to perform at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. They have a little comedy duo. So when Norman is losing his love of life, Sadie, his mum, has to do something to make his dream come true. And she discovers that he's crossed out his 5-year plan and lost that dream, but he wants to find his dad for the first time in his life. And so Sadie plans a road trip not only to perform at the Edinburgh Fringe in the Jax tribute show, but to try to find out who Norman's dad is. And so
quest narrative.
It is a quest, definitely, and it's a road trip. But it's one of those books that it's very uplifting, even though at the heart it's very sad. It's also very funny, and it centres around comedy. And it's also a book really about finding your family, because Sadie and Norman have been everything to each other. But Sadie has this very relatable sense of inadequacy, that she's not enough and that she's a failure as a parent, and, she's forgotten to wash his undies because she's been watching reruns by some old comedian or something. So that's very relatable. It is funny, but it's very heartwarming as well. As in this case, you hear a lot of books reviewed where the adults are unreliable, but in this situation, the adults show up for Norman, the adults in his life. And, it's not so much about that he needs to find his father to be complete. It's definitely, they very much paints the picture that Sadie is enough for him, but it's just the way the adults in his life gather around him and support him that is just truly touching.
So I feel as though for a lot of people, a book where a kid dies or a kid has died is very hard to read and might be like I just don't need that in my life. Like, is that bearable? Like, how much is that in it? And
do you know that's the first question?
Like, no,
that's the first question that I asked Julietta Henderson when I interviewed her, actually.
Oh.
And so this is what she had to say.
I know it's a pretty big ask to open a book with the death of a child, which is not a spoiler for anyone because it's on the back cover as well. But do you know, I don't think I ever thought about it. I wanted to tell the story I wanted to tell, because I was always very careful about and very conscious about the topics that I was dealing with were quite big and serious topics, like grief, death, psoriasis is a very serious topic. If anyone that's had it knows how serious it is. And just, dealing with any kind of grief and loss, but particularly with children, is very hard to be very sensitive about. And I was always conscious about that. So I think I wrote the book with that in mind, being kind, being sensitive. Everyone has their own story, and there's so many readers out there who things like this would affect them or might trigger them or some, stuff like that. So I always did write it. I never censored myself, but I'm kind of how I try to live my life, like just be sensitive of other people's feelings.
Yeah. I think the thing that Julietta kind of says is it was more like this was the story that came to her and she just had to write it. But what she does well, and I think, she expresses this, is that she's very sensitive about that subject matter. But it's never despairing, because the thing is that Norman does have a mum that really loves him. And she's prepared to drop everything for him. And one of the things the book explores is that when they're setting him up to perform at the Edinburgh Fringe, is that, does Sadie really believe he can do this? Or does she think he's going to fall flat on his face, And this is something that she has to come to terms with is she trying to protect him because she thinks he's going to fail? Or can he actually, with the help of the adults in his life, find his thing? And I have to say, that comes together beautifully in the story, but also there's just this really funny and extravagant kind of almost movie-style ending where, they get themselves into this very ridiculously funny and over-the-top situation. But somehow, even though I often don't like those ridiculous over-the-top endings, it just comes together beautifully and you're really buying into it and you're just cheering for this 11-year-old Norman all the way. So, yeah, it's really good.
It sounds a bit like the Rosie Project to me. Is it that sort of vibe?
The Rosie
where
Project.
It's a bit like funny and things go wrong, but hilariously.
Yes, I think so. And it's a little bit like Eleanor Oliphant in that, Sadie's not the most amazing kind of mum where you just go like, oh, yeah, she's a legend, like she's a little bit hopeless, She spends a lot of her life on the couch eating potato chips and forgetting to cook a proper dinner. But what she does have is just this desire to be a good mum to her son, and also they do a good job of making her sympathetic by explaining the stuff that happened in her past that sort of led her to being in the situation of being a single mum and not knowing who the father is. It's actually quite sympathetic when you understand what she's been through in that time in her life and how well she's kind of recovered from the stuff that happened to her. So, yeah, it's a great read. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Hope Book Club. In this episode, we have reviewed Australian fiction. We started with Smart Ovens for Lonely People by Elizabeth Tan. There was Chasing the McCubbin by Sandi Saunich, and The Funny Thing About Norman Foreman by Julietta Henderson. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Email us bookclub@hopemedia.com.au or text in 0448 40 20 20. And thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club, because life's just better with an Australian book.
Hope 103.2. Thanks for listening.